The massive space station called Nexus floated in the void between star systems like a metal city built among the stars. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 47 different alien species gathered in the great assembly chamber. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as creatures with tentacles, scales, and features beyond human imagination debated the fate of one troublesome species. Ambassador HFY stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled form towering over most other delegates. His red eyes scanned the assembled crowd as he prepared to deliver what he believed would be the final word on the human problem. The Valdran Empire had grown tired of these upstart mammals who dared to expand beyond their small corner of the galaxy without permission. Honored delegates, HFY began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. For 3 years, we have watched humanity spread like a plague across systems that rightfully belong to older, wiser civilizations. They build colonies without council approval. They mine resources without paying proper tribute. They fight our enforcement fleets with weapons that should not exist in their primitive hands. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Korathi delegate clicked his mandibles in approval, while the gaseous Nethri representative pulsed with colors that indicated strong support. Only a few species remained silent, remembering their own first encounters with human military forces. Today, we end this conflict with wisdom rather than further bloodshed, HFY continued. Our combined fleets number in the thousands. Our technology surpasses theirs by centuries. Yet these humans continue to resist because they do not understand their place in the galactic order. Far from the political theater of Nexus, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UEC Defiance, one of humanity's most advanced battleships. The vessel cruised silently through the asteroid field at the edge of human space, its hull scarred from dozens of battles fought over the past 3 years. Morrison was a man in his early 40s with graying hair and eyes that had seen, too, much combat. His crew trusted him completely because he had brought them through encounters that should have destroyed them. "Captain, we're picking up a transmission from the direction of Nexus," reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her communications station. She was young for her rank, barely 25, but she had proven her worth during the Battle of Kepler. Stationed when she had managed to decode alien battle frequencies in real time. "Put it on speakers," Morrison ordered, settling into his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew of the Defiance continued their duties with the quiet efficiency of veterans. Chief Engineer Ben Carter monitored power distribution from his station while Communications Officer Lisa Park worked to clean up the signal quality. The transmission crackled to life, carrying HFY's words across the vast distances between stars. Morrison listened with growing tension as the alien ambassador outlined the Council's ultimatum. Humanity must surrender their outer colonies. They must accept Council oversight of all future expansion. They must submit to alien authority in exchange for what the Council called peace. 72 hours, Morrison repeated when the transmission ended. "They're giving us 72 hours to surrender everything we've built out here. Sir, should we relay this to command?" Rodriguez asked, her fingers hovering over her console. Morrison stared out at the stars visible through the bridge's main viewport. Somewhere among those distant lights were human families who had left Earth to build new lives on frontier worlds. Children had been born on those colonies who knew no other home. Send it through secure channels to Luna Command. Make sure they know we received it intact. On Luna, in the underground facilities that house the United Nations Space Command, President Helen Baker read the Council's ultimatum for the 3rd time. She was a woman who had risen through the ranks of Earth's diplomatic corps before the alien contact changed everything. Now she found herself leading humanity through its first interstellar war. "They want us to give up everything beyond Mars," said General Paul Griffin, her military advisor. He was a career soldier who had adapted remarkably well to fighting enemies from other worlds. Every colony ship we sent out, every mining station, every research outpost. Secretary of Defense Curran White paced back and forth in front of the main display screen. She had been advocating for stronger military responses since the conflict began. They think we're beaten. 3 years of fighting, and they still don't understand what they're dealing with. President Baker studied the star charts showing human territory. Red markers indicated worlds under attack or already lost to Council forces. Yellow markers showed systems where fighting continued. Green markers represented the core human worlds that remained secure. The pattern told a story of gradual retreat and mounting pressure. "Madame President," Griffin said carefully, "there is another option. Something we've been preparing for exactly this scenario." Baker looked up from the charts. She had authorized many black projects since the war began, secret weapons and defensive systems that the public knew nothing about. Protocol Omega? Yes, ma'am. Every fleet commander has been briefed. Every colony governor knows the rule. We've been preparing for this moment since the first alien ship crossed into human space. The president walked to the window that looked out over Luna's ancient surface. Earth hung in the black sky above, blue and white and beautiful. Billions of humans lived on that world, most of them unaware of how close they had come to losing everything their species had built among the stars. "The Council expects a response within 72 hours, she said finally. "What they're going to get instead is silence." Across human space, commanders received new orders through quantum encrypted channels that alien technology could not intercept. Admiral Chris Johnson, commanding the Frontier Defense Fleet at New Geneva, read his instructions. Twice before believing them. He was to implement Protocol Omega immediately, along with every other human military asset. Johnson called his senior staff together in the secure briefing room aboard his flagship. These men and women had fought beside him through countless battles, watching human tactics evolve from desperate survival to something approaching true military doctrine. They deserved to understand what was about to happen. "As of this moment, we go dark," Johnson announced. "No communications beyond secured quantum channels. No responses to alien transmissions. No acknowledgement of Council authority or ultimatums. Every ship, every station, every colony maintains complete radio silence." His communications officer, Commander Betty Walsh, looked confused. "Sir, won't that make the Council think we've surrendered?" Johnson smiled grimly. "Commander, that's exactly what we want them to think. The Council has spent 3 years trying to understand how humans fight. They've analyzed our tactics, our technology, our responses to their attacks. What they haven't figured out is that sometimes the most dangerous thing a human can do is absolutely nothing at all." Within hours, human space began to fall silent. Automated distress beacons stopped transmitting. Commercial traffic controllers ceased their regular broadcasts. Even the routine maintenance signals from orbital platforms went quiet. To outside observers, it appeared as though human civilization was simply powering down. The silence spread from system to system like a wave moving through human territory. On colony worlds, families gathered around communication arrays and watched them go dark. They trusted their leaders even when they could not understand the strategy behind this decision. They had survived 3 years of alien attacks by working together, and they would face whatever came next the same way Captain Morrison stood on his bridge as the Defiance drifted silently through space. His crew had secured all non-essential systems and activated the ship's stealth protocols. They were ghosts now, invisible to alien sensors, but still watching, still waiting. "Captain," Rodriguez whispered, as if speaking too loudly might give away their position. "How long do we maintain silence?" Morrison continued staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were preparing to occupy human worlds. They believed the silence meant surrender, that humanity had finally accepted defeat. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Until it's time to speak," he replied. "And when we do speak, Commander, it won't be with words." Ambassador Zethkari paced the length of his private chambers aboard Nexus Station, his blue scales rippling with frustration. 3 days had passed since the Council delivered their ultimatum to humanity, and the silence from human space was complete. No diplomatic response, no military posturing, no desperate pleas for mercy. Nothing at all. "Have you tried all frequencies?" he demanded of his communications specialist, a thin creature with 6 arms who operated multiple control panels. "At once. Every known human channel, Ambassador," the specialist replied in a voice like grinding metal. "Their commercial networks are dead. Military frequencies show no activity. Even their emergency beacons have gone silent. It is as if they have simply vanished from the galaxy." Zethkari struck the metal wall with his clawed fist, leaving deep scratches in the surface. 3 years of war had taught him to respect human unpredictability, but this response made no sense. Civilized species negotiated. They argued terms or begged for mercy. They did not simply disappear. Aboard the Council science vessel Harmony of Spheres, Dr. Nina Walsh bent over her research console with growing concern. She was one of the few xenobiologists who specialized in human behavior, and her data was painting a disturbing picture. Dr. Walsh was a Karathi, her insect-like features and compound eyes giving her a perspective on alien psychology that others lacked. "Computer, display human military responses to extinction-level threats throughout their recorded history," she commanded. The holographic display filled with data from Earth's violent past. The patterns were clear to anyone who knew how to read them. When faced with overwhelming odds, humans did not surrender immediately. They withdrew. They went silent. They used that silence to prepare for devastating counterattacks that their enemies never saw coming. Dr. Walsh's mandibles clicked nervously as she studied the Battle of Stalingrad, the Siege of Vienna, the Tet Offensive. In each case, periods of apparent human defeat preceded victories that shocked their enemies. The silence was not surrender. It was preparation. "I must warn the Council," she whispered to herself, but she knew her voice would be lost among those who believed human silence meant victory was already theirs. On the human colony world of Haven, Governor Dan Lewis watched the last civilian transport disappear into hyperspace. The evacuation had been carefully planned to look natural, like families choosing to leave a dangerous frontier world. In reality, every non-essential person was being moved to safety before the storm broke. "Sir, that's the last of them," reported Colonel Sue Parker, the military commander responsible for Haven's defense. She was a career soldier with short gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. "We're down to essential personnel only." Lewis nodded as he looked out over the colonies. Main settlement. Haven had been his life's work, a world where humans could build something new among the stars. Now it would become something else entirely. "How long until the defensive systems are fully active?" 12 hours, sir. "The underground installations have been powered up for weeks, but we needed the civilians clear before we could run final tests. When the Council comes looking for an easy victory, they're going to find something very different." The governor smiled grimly. Haven looked like a normal farming colony from orbit, but beneath its surface lay enough firepower to destroy a battle fleet. The colonists who had evacuated knew they might never see their homes again, but they trusted their leaders to do what was necessary. Captain Jake Morrison's ship drifted silently through the Karathi home system, invisible to alien sensors. Thanks to stealth technology that should not have existed. The U's Defiance had spent the past week mapping Council fleet positions while maintaining complete radio silence. Morrison stood on his bridge, watching alien warships patrol in formations that assumed human resistance had collapsed. "Captain, I count 47 ships in this system alone," whispered Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. Even though they could not be detected, the crew spoke quietly out of habit. They're spread out like they're expecting to occupy territory rather than fight. For it, Chief Engineer Ben Carter looked up from his tactical display. "Sir, their defensive formations are terrible. They're positioned like they're on parade duty, not combat patrol, if we wanted to hit them." "We wait," Morrison said firmly. "Our orders are to observe and report. The Council thinks we've given up, and we're going to let them keep thinking. That until the moment comes to prove them wrong." Communications Officer Lisa Park monitored alien transmissions from her station. The Council forces were relaxed, confident, already planning victory celebrations. They spoke of dividing human territory among themselves and deciding which species would govern which former human worlds. Far from the main battle zones, Captain Steve Martinez commanded the stealth ship UES Phantom as it ghost walked through Council supply lines. His vessel was smaller than the Defiance, but equipped with even more advanced cloaking systems. Martinez was a quiet man who had volunteered for the most dangerous reconnaissance missions because someone had to do them. "Sir, we're picking up massive supply convoys heading toward human space," reported his pilot, Janet Cole. She was young, but steady under pressure, having learned her skills during the retreat from the Centauri system. "Looks like they're preparing for a long occupation." Sensor specialist Rick Moore studied the alien ships through passive scans. "Captain, these aren't warships. They're carrying construction equipment, administrative supplies, even entertainment systems for garrison troops. They really think the war is over." Martinez watched the alien convoy pass by his hidden ship. Hundreds of vessels carrying everything needed to rule human worlds, all moving slowly and confidently through space they believed was already theirs. "Send a coded burst transmission to Fleet Command. Let them know the Council is fully committed to their occupation plans." On Luna, President Helen Baker met with her inner circle in the deepest bunker beneath the United Nations Space Command. The room was small and cramped, filled with displays showing the positions of human and alien forces throughout known space. General Paul Griffin pointed to red icons representing Council fleets. "They're moving into position around our major colonies," he reported. "Intelligence suggests they'll begin their occupation within the next 48 hours. They expect to find our worlds defenseless and our people ready to accept alien rule." Secretary of Defense Karen White smiled coldly. "General, how many Council ships have we destroyed in the past 3 years?" "Approximately 400 confirmed kills, ma'am. Another 200 probable." "And how many ships do our intelligence reports suggest they've brought for this final operation?" Griffin consulted his notes. "Over 3,000 vessels, ma'am. The largest alien fleet ever assembled." President Baker stood and walked to the display showing human space. Green icons marked worlds that appeared defenseless, but were actually preparing for the largest military deception in galactic history. They're bringing everything they have because they think we've already lost. They want to overwhelm us with numbers and end this war quickly. "Madame President," Griffin said carefully, "are you certain about Protocol Omega? Once we begin, there's no going back. The Council will never again see us as a species they can negotiate with peacefully." Baker thought of the children being born on human worlds, growing up under the shadow of alien occupation if this plan failed. She thought of the explorers and pioneers who had given their lives to push humanity to the stars. "General, the Council made their choice when they demanded our surrender. Now they'll learn what human silence really means." The silence continued to spread through human space like a living thing. Automated systems shut down on schedule. Communication arrays went dark. Even the background hum of civilization disappeared. as if humanity had simply decided to stop existing. Council probe ships entered human systems and found what appeared to be abandoned worlds. Space stations drifted empty and cold. Mining facilities showed no signs of activity. The probes reported back that human resistance had indeed collapsed, that their worlds were ready for occupation. But in the depths of space, human eyes watched. Every alien movement. Silent ships tracked council fleets. Hidden bases powered up weapons that had been built in secret over 3 years of apparent defeat. The silence was not empty. It was full of terrible potential. Dr. Walsh continued her research aboard the Harmony of Spheres, growing more alarmed with each data point. Human silence was not random. It was coordinated, complete, and historically preceded their most devastating military actions. She prepared urgent warnings for the council leadership, knowing her words would likely be ignored until it was too late. The storm was coming, hidden behind humanity's perfect silence. Fleet Commander Quinthara stood in the command center of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Eternal Victory. Through the viewing ports, he could see hundreds of council warships stretching out into the darkness of space. This was the largest military force ever assembled by the Galactic Alliance, and it was moving toward what appeared to be defenseless human worlds. Quinthara was a member of the Zephyri race, tall and graceful with silver skin that reflected the bridge lights. He had spent 40 years climbing through the ranks of the council military, and this campaign would crown his career with glory. The humans had finally learned their place in the galaxy. Commander, our advanced scouts report no resistance from human forces, his tactical officer announced. The bridge crew worked quietly around him, confident in their overwhelming advantage. All major human colonies appeared to have been abandoned or are offering no military response. Excellent, Quinthara replied, studying the tactical displays. Begin Phase 1 of the occupation. I want our forces in position around every major human world within 6 hours. This war ends today. The alien fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each heading toward a different human colony. They moved with the casual confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Their formation was spread wide, designed more for rapid occupation than for battle. Deep in the asteroid belt, surrounding the industrial world of New Detroit, Captain Steve Martinez watched the approaching council fleet through his ship's passive sensors. The U's Phantom remained completely invisible, drifting among the space rocks like just another piece of debris. Martinez had been hiding in this system for 2 weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. Captain, I count 68 ships. In the main assault group, whispered sensor specialist Rick Moore. They're not even running combat formations. Look at those gaps in their defensive screen. Pilot Janet Cole shook her head in amazement. Sir, it's like they're expecting a parade, not a battle. They have no idea what's waiting for them down there. Martinez smiled grimly as he watched the alien ships approach New Detroit. The planet looked peaceful from space, its cities glowing softly in the darkness. What the Council fleet could not see were the massive weapon platforms hidden beneath the surface, the stealth fighters waiting in underground hangars, and the orbital defense systems disguised as communication satellites. Send a coded message to New Detroit Command, Martinez ordered. Tell Governor Lewis that his guests are about to arrive. On the surface of New Detroit, Governor Dan Lewis received the message in his underground command bunker. The colony had been his home for 15 years, and he had watched it grow from a small mining outpost into a thriving industrial center. Now it would serve a very different purpose. All defensive systems report ready, Governor, announced Colonel Martha Hayes, his military commander. She was a veteran of the first alien contact wars, her face bearing scars from battles fought. In the Outer Rim, we have 40 hidden weapon platforms, 200 stealth fighters, and enough orbital mines to stop a fleet twice their size. Lewis looked at the tactical display showing the approaching council ships. Each red dot represented hundreds of alien soldiers who believed they were coming to occupy a defeated world. "Colonel, are our people clear of the surface installations?" "Yes, sir." "All civilians are in the deep shelters. Military personnel are at their assigned positions. We've been drilling for this scenario for 6 months." The governor nodded and activated the colony-wide communication system. His voice reached every bunker and defensive position on the planet. "This is Governor Lewis. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when they mistake human silence for surrender. Make every shot count." Aboard the Eternal Victory, Fleet Commander Quenthara received reports from his scout ships as they entered the new Detroit system. The planet showed normal energy signatures and appeared to be inhabited, but there were no military vessels in orbit and no defensive positions visible from space. "Commander, the humans are not even trying to resist," his communications officer reported with barely concealed amusement. "Their planetary defense grid is either offline or non-existent. We should be able to land occupation forces within the hour." Quenthara allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The council had been right to offer the humans terms. They were a young species that had simply gotten carried away with their expansion into space. Now they would learn to accept their proper place under alien guidance. "Begin orbital insertion," he commanded. "I want troops on the ground before the humans can organize any last-minute resistance." Dr. Nina Walsh worked frantically in her laboratory, aboard the Harmony of Spheres as the Council fleet moved toward its targets. Her research into human psychology had revealed terrifying patterns, but her warnings continued to fall on deaf ears. The military commanders were too excited by the prospect of easy victory to listen to concerns from a mere scientist. "Computer, analyze human communication patterns during their period of silence," she commanded. The holographic display showed the complete absence of transmissions from human space over the past week. But Dr. Walsh noticed something that others had missed. The silence was too perfect, too coordinated. In her studies of other species, she had never seen an entire civilization go quiet at exactly the same time. Natural communication breakdown was messy and gradual. This silence had been planned. "Oh no," she whispered as the implications became clear. "They're not surrendering. They're preparing." She tried once more to contact the fleet commanders, but her calls were routed to junior officers who dismissed her concerns. The military had no time for scientific theories when victory was so close at hand, not far from the main battle zones. The human colony ship UES Pioneer drifted silently through space near the Council's primary supply depot. Captain Linda Thompson had been pretending her ship was disabled for 3 weeks, sending out faint distress signals that made alien patrols think she was harmless. "Captain, the supply depot is at minimum security," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ray Cooper. "Most of their defensive fleet has been sent to support the main offensive. We're looking at maybe 20 guard ships." Thompson studied the massive space station that served as the logistical heart of the Council's war effort. Hundreds of supply ships docked there daily, bringing fuel, ammunition, and equipment to alien forces throughout human space. Without it, their entire military machine would grind to a halt. "How long since we sent our last distress signal?" she asked. 18 hours, Captain. They think we're dead in space." Thompson nodded. Her ship carried a skeleton crew of volunteers who had accepted that this might be a one-way mission. They had spent months preparing for this moment, studying the depot's defenses and waiting for the perfect opportunity. "All right, people. We've been silent for 3 weeks. Time to make some noise." Back on Luna, President Helen Baker stood in the command center watching displays that showed Council fleets moving into position around human worlds. General Paul Griffin and Secretary of Defense Karen White flanked her as they monitored the largest military operation in human history. "Madame President, all human forces report ready," Griffin announced. "Every hidden base, every stealth ship, every defensive installation is in position and waiting for your order." Baker looked at the clock on the wall. In less than an hour, Council forces would begin landing on human worlds, expecting to find a defeated population ready to accept alien rule. Instead, they would discover that humanity's silence had been the calm before the storm. "The Council wanted our response to their ultimatum," she said quietly. "They're about to get it." Secretary White smiled coldly. "Ma'am, our forces are reporting that alien formations are completely unprepared for resistance. They're spread out, overconfident, and moving into positions that will become death traps the moment we spring our surprise." The president thought of all the human families who had trusted their leaders to protect them, all the pioneers who had died building colonies among the stars, all the soldiers who had fought hopeless battles to buy time for this moment. "Council proposed peace from a position of strength," she said, "but they made one critical mistake. They assumed our silence meant we had accepted defeat." She turned to face the assembled staff officers who would coordinate humanity's response. These men and women had spent 3 years preparing for this day, building weapons in secret, positioning forces where the enemy would never expect them, and planning the most audacious military operation in galactic history. "Signal all commands," President Baker ordered. "Execute Protocol Omega." Across human space, the silence finally broke. Fleet Commander Quenthara watched his ships move into orbit around New Detroit with growing satisfaction. The planet appeared completely defenseless, its surface installations showing no signs of military activity. His tactical officers reported clear landing zones and minimal energy signatures from what appeared to be civilian settlements. "Commander, advanced scouts report the planet is ready for occupation," his communications officer announced. "No defensive satellites detected. No military vessels in system. The humans appear to have abandoned any attempt at resistance." Quenthara nodded approvingly as his fleet settled into standard occupation formation. 68 warships spread across the planet's orbital space, their weapons pointed downward at the settlements below. It was a textbook deployment for pacifying a conquered world. "Begin atmospheric insertion of occupation forces," he commanded. "I want troops on the ground within 30 minutes." The first wave of Council dropships launched from the fleet carriers, carrying thousands of alien soldiers toward what they believed would be an easy landing. The ships descended through New Detroit's atmosphere in tight formation, their pilots relaxed and confident. On the planet's surface, Governor Dan Lewis watched the alien ships approach through his command bunker's periscope. Around him, his staff monitored defensive systems that had been hidden for months beneath fake mining equipment and industrial facilities. Colonel Martha Hayes stood beside him, her hand hovering over the activation controls. "Sir, enemy dropships are entering the kill zone," she reported quietly. "All weapon platforms report ready. Stealth fighters are prepared for launch." Lewis continued watching the alien ships descend toward his world. These soldiers thought they were coming to occupy a defeated planet. They had no idea they were flying into the most elaborate trap in human military history. "Fire," he said simply. The planet's surface erupted with hidden weapons. What appeared to be mining installations suddenly revealed themselves as massive particle beam cannons. Fake communication towers transformed into missile launchers. Underground hangar doors opened to release swarms of stealth fighters that had been waiting in concealment for weeks. The first wave of Council dropships disintegrated under concentrated fire from weapons they never knew existed. Particle beams carved through their hulls while guided missiles tracked down every ship trying to escape back to orbit. Within minutes, the entire first wave was destroyed. Fleet Commander Quanthara stared in shock at his tactical display as red icons marked the destruction of his assault force. "What happened?" he demanded. "Where did those weapons come from?" His sensor officer worked frantically at his console. "Sir, massive energy signatures are appearing all across the planet's surface. The humans have been hiding a complete defensive grid under false installations. Our intelligence was completely wrong." Before Quanthara could respond, alarms began screaming throughout his flagship. "Commander, multiple missile launches detected from the planet. Incoming warheads, impact." In 40 seconds, the Council fleet found itself under attack from weapons that should not have existed. Orbital defense platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites suddenly came online, revealing advanced particle cannons and missile systems. The aliens scrambled to return fire, but their ships were positioned for occupation, not combat. Captain Jake Morrison's voice cut through the chaos on the secured human command frequency. "All units, this is Defiance. Execute attack plan Alpha. Repeat, execute attack plan Alpha." The UE says Defiance dropped its stealth field and appeared directly behind the Council fleet, along with 12 other human warships that had been hiding in the asteroid field for 2 weeks. Morrison's battle group opened fire on the alien ships from their most vulnerable angle, catching them completely by surprise. "Target their command vessels first," Morrison ordered his weapons officer. "Take out their coordination, and they'll fall apart." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked her communication station with deadly precision, coordinating attacks between the planet's defenses and the hidden fleet. "Captain, New Detroit reports successful destruction of the first assault wave. Governor Lewis is requesting we target the enemy carriers." Chief Engineer Ben Carter rerouted power to the ship's main guns as the Defiance tore through the confused Council formation. "Sir, their defensive formations are collapsing. They're trying to regroup, but they have no idea where our attacks are coming from." Across human space, the pattern repeated itself on world after world. Council fleets that had approached what they thought were defenseless colonies suddenly found themselves under attack from hidden defenses and surprise attacks by ships that were supposed to be destroyed. On Haven, Colonel Sue Parker watched alien dropships burn in the atmosphere as her hidden weapon platforms carved them out of the sky. All defensive positions continue firing. Don't let a single enemy ship reach the surface. At the mining world of Kepler Station, Admiral Chris Johnson's fleet emerged from hyperspace directly on top of the Council forces. His ships had been hiding in the system's outer asteroid belt, waiting for the aliens to commit to their attack. "This is Admiral Johnson to all Council vessels," he broadcast on open frequencies. "You came here expecting to find a defeated enemy. Instead, you found humans who know how to fight. Surrender now or be destroyed." The Council forces, caught completely off guard by coordinated attacks from multiple directions, began to break formation. Some ships tried to retreat, while others attempted to fight back. But their coordination was shattered by the sudden reversal of what they thought was certain victory. Captain Linda Thompson smiled grimly as her apparently disabled ship suddenly came to life near the Council's main supply depot. The U.S. Pioneer had been playing dead for 3 weeks, drifting helplessly while alien patrols ignored what they thought was wreckage. "All systems online," reported Lieutenant Ray Cooper from his tactical station. "The depot's defenses are minimal. Most of their fleet is supporting the main offensive." Thompson activated her ship's weapons and communications simultaneously. "This is Captain Thompson to all Council forces. Your supply depot is now under human control. Without fuel and ammunition, your fleets have approximately 6 hours of combat capability remaining." The Pioneer's weapons opened fire on the massive supply station, targeting fuel storage tanks and ammunition depots. Secondary explosions rippled through the facility As years of stockpiled war materials went up in flames, Dr. Nina Walsh felt. Her research vessel shuddered as explosions rocked the supply depot nearby. Her warnings about human psychology had been ignored, and now the Council was paying the price for underestimating their enemy. Computer, analyze the coordination of human. Attacks across all battle zones, she commanded desperately. The data was terrifying in its implications. Every human attack had been perfectly timed and coordinated, despite maintaining complete radio silence for over a week. The silence had not been surrender, but preparation for the most sophisticated military operation the galaxy had ever seen. Fleet. Commander Quanthara tried desperately to rally his scattered forces as his flagship took damage from weapons that appeared from nowhere. All ships, fall back to defensive formation. Request immediate reinforcements from reserve fleets. But his communications officer looked up from his console with fear in his alien eyes. Sir, we're receiving reports from all sectors. Every council. Fleet is under similar attack. There are no reserve forces available. The humans have struck everywhere at once. President Helen Baker watched the tactical displays in her Luna Command Center as reports flooded in from across human space. Every council fleet was in retreat or destroyed. Every alien supply depot was burning. Every occupation force had been annihilated before reaching the ground. Madame President, preliminary reports show the destruction or disabling of over 60% of the Council's invasion fleet, General Paul Griffin announced. Human casualties are minimal. The enemy was completely unprepared for any resistance. Secretary of Defense Karen White smiled coldly as she monitored alien communications frequencies. They're calling for reinforcements that don't exist and trying to retreat to bases that are already under attack. Ma'am, the Council's military power has been broken in a single coordinated strike. Baker nodded as she watched the red icons representing alien forces disappear from the tactical displays one by one. Humanity's silence had lured the entire Council. Fleet into the most devastating trap in galactic history. Signal all human forces, she ordered. Pursue retreating enemy vessels to the edge of our territory, then let them go. We've made our point. The silence was broken, and the galaxy would. Never underestimate humanity again. Ambassador Zethkari stood in the ruins of what had been the Council's greatest military fleet, watching rescue ships pick up survivors from the wreckage floating in space around New Detroit. His blue scales had lost their luster, and his red eyes held the hollow look of someone who had witnessed the impossible. In less than 6 hours, the largest military force in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing ships. Ambassador, we're receiving transmissions from the surviving fleet commanders. His communications specialist reported with a trembling voice. Casualties are estimated at 70% across all battle groups. The humans have ceased their attacks but are maintaining defensive positions around all their worlds. Zethkari closed his eyes as the full scope of the disaster became clear. The Council had brought 3,000 ships to crush human resistance once and for all. Less than 900 were still capable of combat, and most of those were damaged and low on supplies after the coordinated attacks on their logistics bases. Have any of our forces attempted to regroup for a counterattack? He asked, though he already knew the answer. No, sir. All surviving commanders report their forces are scattered and demoralized. Fleet Commander Quanthara's flagship was destroyed with all hands. The chain of command has completely collapsed. Dr. Nina Walsh's research vessel was one of the few Council ships to escape the slaughter intact, mainly because she had positioned it far from the main battle zones while conducting her psychological studies. Now her warnings about human behavior seemed prophetic rather than paranoid. Computer, compile a complete analysis of human tactical coordination during the recent engagements, she commanded. The data that appeared on her screens told a story that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. The attacks had been perfectly synchronized across dozens of star systems, despite the humans maintaining complete radio silence for over a week. Every hidden weapon, every stealth ship, every defensive installation had acted as part of a single coordinated plan. The level of preparation and discipline required was beyond anything the Council had thought possible from such a young species. They were never surrendering, Dr. Walsh whispered to herself. They were preparing the greatest military deception in galactic history. On New Detroit, Governor Dan Lewis emerged from his command bunker to survey the wreckage of the Council fleet scattered across his world's orbital space. Burning alien ships lit up the night sky like falling stars, and the planet's hidden defenses had proven devastatingly effective. Not a single enemy soldier had reached the surface alive. Governor, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Council vessels still in system, reported Colonel Martha Hayes. They're requesting permission to recover survivors and withdraw from human space. Lewis looked up at the stars where human ships now patrolled in formations that spoke of strength rather than desperation. 3 years of apparent retreat had led to this moment of total victory. Grant their requests, Colonel. Let them take their wounded and leave. They've learned what they came here to learn. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as his battle group pursued the remnants of the Council fleet toward the edge of human space. His orders were clear. Escort the aliens out of human territory, but do not pursue them beyond the border. This was not about conquest, but about sending a message. Captain, the alien ships are maintaining course for the Nexus station, reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. They're not attempting any aggressive maneuvers. I think they just want to get as far from us as possible. Chief Engineer Ben Carter looked up from his damage control reports. Sir, our casualties were incredibly light, considering the scope of the operation. The enemy never had a chance to coordinate an effective response. Morrison nodded as he watched the defeated alien fleet limp away from human space. That's what happens when you mistake planning for panic, Ben. The Council thought our silence meant we'd given up. Instead, we used it to coordinate the perfect ambush. Communications Officer Lisa Park monitored alien transmissions as the fleeing ships tried to make sense of their defeat. Captain, they're calling it the Silent War in their communications. They're telling each other that humans are more dangerous when they stop talking than when they're making threats. At the edge of human space, Admiral Chris Johnson's frontier fleet took up new patrol positions that no longer needed to hide in asteroid fields or maintain radio silence. His ships moved openly through space that was now undisputedly human territory. Admiral, we're receiving long-range transmissions from Earth, his communications officer announced. President Baker is requesting a full report on the operation's success. Johnson smiled as he looked out at stars that would never again be threatened by alien invasion fleets. Signal Luna Command. Operation successful. Enemy forces routed. Human space is secure. The Admiral thought about the 3 years of desperate fighting that had led to this moment. Human forces had learned hard lessons about alien technology and tactics, but they had also discovered something more important. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humanity did not break. They adapted, they planned, and they struck back with devastating precision. Captain Linda Thompson surveyed the wreckage of the Council's main supply depot as her crew worked to secure valuable intelligence from the destroyed facility. The U's Pioneer had accomplished its mission perfectly, crippling the alien war effort just as their main offensive began. Captain, we've recovered their complete battle plans and supply schedules, reported Lieutenant Ray Cooper. The Council was planning to occupy human space for at least 50 years. They brought enough equipment to govern our worlds as permanent colonies. Thompson shook her head in amazement at the alien arrogance. They really thought we'd just roll over and accept. Alien rule. They had no idea what they were dealing with. On Luna, President Helen Baker addressed the assembled leaders of humanity in a secure conference room deep beneath the United Nations Space Command headquarters. General Paul Griffin and Secretary of Defense Karen White flanked her as she spoke. To governors, admirals, and colony representatives from across human space, the Council's invasion has been completely defeated, she announced. Their military capability has been broken, their supply lines destroyed, and their confidence shattered. The threat to human independence has been eliminated. A cheer went up from the assembled leaders, but Baker raised her hand for silence. However, we must remember that this victory came at a price. We've revealed capabilities that we kept secret for 3 years. The galaxy now knows that humanity is not the weak species they believed us to be. General Griffin stepped forward to address the group. Our intelligence suggests that several alien species are already reconsidering their relationships with both the Council and with us. Some are expressing interest in establishing independent diplomatic contact with human worlds. Secretary White nodded approvingly. The balance of power in this region of the galaxy has fundamentally shifted. We're no longer fighting for survival. We're positioned to shape the future of interstellar politics. Back at Nexus Station, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in an atmosphere of shock and recrimination. Representatives from species that had supported the invasion now scrambled to distance themselves from the failed operation. Others demanded explanations for how human military capabilities had been so drastically underestimated. Ambassador Zethkari took the podium. To address the assembly, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. Honored delegates, we must face the reality of what has occurred. Our attempt to impose council authority on humanity has not only failed, but has demonstrated that we severely misjudged their capabilities and resolve. Murmurs of fear and anger rippled through the assembly as the full implications became clear. The humans had not just won a military victory. They had shattered the Council's reputation for invincibility and demonstrated that young species could successfully resist galactic authority. The humans answered our ultimatum with silence, Zethkari continued. But that silence spoke louder than any words. It told us that they would rather fight impossible odds than accept subjugation. It told us that they had been preparing for this confrontation while we assumed they were beaten. Dr. Walsh's research had been distributed to every council member, and the psychological profile of humanity painted a disturbing picture. This was a species that became more dangerous when cornered, more creative when desperate, and more unified when threatened with extinction. President Baker stood at the window of her Luna office, looking out at Earth, hanging in the black sky above. The blue and white world had been the birthplace of a species that had just announced its arrival on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. Madame President, we're receiving diplomatic overtures from 16 different species, her aide announced. They're all requesting direct negotiations outside of Council oversight. Baker smiled as she thought about the future that humanity had secured through their silence and sacrifice. The Council had proposed peace from a position of assumed superiority. They had offered humanity a place in the galactic community as subordinates and supplicants. Instead, humanity had answered with silence that concealed strength.